Welcome, dear friends. And today I will share with you a heartwarming story of a mother's unwavering love and the power of hope to overcome even the darkest of times. Enjoy the story. Sarah Taylor watched with growing dread as her husband John paced back and forth across the living room of their modest suburban home, his face etched with anger and frustration. He had become increasingly irritable and on edge lately, ever since their 8-year-old son Michael had fallen ill with a rare autoimmune disorder. Sarah flinched as John abruptly halted his pacing and fixed his cold blue eyes on her. Without a word, he turned and stalked out of the room. A moment later, she heard him banging around in the kitchen, presumably making himself a cup of tea. It had become his coping mechanism lately. Heart pounding, Sarah hurried after him. She found John hunched over the kitchen counter, his hands shaking as he tried to spoon sugar into a mug. Gently, Sarah took the spoon from him and finished preparing the tea. "Here, honey, let me," she said soothingly, handing him the steaming mug. "Listen, I know Michael's medical expenses are putting a strain on us financially, but the doctor said this treatment will make a huge difference. He'll only need checkups once a year after this until he's older and his immune system is stronger." John took a sip of tea and glowered at her over the rim of the mug. "And how long is that supposed to take, huh? How many more years are we going to be hemorrhaging money on all this?" "John, please," Sarah pleaded. "It's for Michael's health. What else can we do?" "Oh, I don't know. Maybe you could get a real job instead of tapping away on your little computer all day," John sneered. "Bring in some actual income for once." Sarah recoiled as if slapped. "That's not fair. My remote editing work may not pay as much as your job, but I'm doing what I can. We're in this together." "Are we?" John slammed his mug down, sloshing tea on the counter. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like I'm the only one making sacrifices around here. You expect me to just keep shelling out for all of Michael's treatments and medications while you get to play stay-at-home mom. Well, what do you suggest we do then? Rob a bank?" Sarah threw up her hands in exasperation. A thought occurred to her. "Actually, I just remembered. I inherited my great-aunt Mildred's old house out in the country when she passed away last year. We could always sell that. It would give us a cushion." John scoffed derisively. "That broken-down shack? Good luck finding anyone dumb enough to buy that eyesore. Face it, Sarah, we're stuck, trapped by your son's endless medical needs." "Our son," Sarah corrected sharply. "Michael is our son, and I can't believe how greedy and heartless you're being. He didn't ask to get sick." Sarah's eyes burned with tears as she watched John storm out of the house that evening, ignoring her pleas for them to spend some much-needed quality time together as a family. As the door slammed behind him, she collapsed onto the couch and buried her face in her hands, sobs racking her slender frame. What had happened to her caring, compassionate husband? He had become a different man ever since Michael first got sick 2 years ago. At first, John had been loving and supportive, holding her hand through the sleepless nights in the hospital. But as their son's condition worsened and the medical bills piled up, he grew increasingly resentful. Sarah knew the stress of working overtime to pay for Michael's treatments while she stayed home to care for him weighed heavily on John. But she was doing her best to contribute with her freelance editing work. It just didn't bring in as much money as John's corporate management job. And Michael's weak immune system meant he got severely ill and had frequent complications, preventing him from regularly attending school. Even their doctor said what Michael really needed was an extended stay at a specialized children's medical facility down south, where the warm climate and advanced treatments could bolster his health. But the cost was astronomical. "If only John could see I want that for Michael too," Sarah sighed to herself. "I'm not trying to sabotage him. I just want our little boy to be healthy and happy." With a sinking heart, Sarah realized John might not be coming home that night. He had started disappearing more frequently, sometimes staying out until dawn. At first she had worried, but now she almost hoped he would stay away. His unpredictable rages frightened her. Wearily climbing the stairs, Sarah peeked into Michael's room and found him fitfully sleeping, his face pale and clammy. Her heart ached seeing him so frail. He must have overheard her fighting with John again. Sitting on the edge of his bed, She gently stroked his dark hair, murmuring soothing words until he settled. Sarah didn't get a wink of sleep that night, her mind churning as she stared at the empty pillow beside her. When morning finally dawned, she was up fixing breakfast, determined to stay strong for her son. The jangle of keys in the front door made her tense. John was finally home. Bracing herself, she stepped into the foyer, only to reel back in shock. John wasn't alone. He had his arm slung around an unfamiliar young woman, her face heavily made up, her dress far too revealing for 9 a.m. Who's this? Sarah stammered, eyes wide. This is Tina, John announced with a smirk. She's the new lady of the house, so I'd show some respect if I were you. What? Sarah could barely process his words. What are you saying? John stepped forward, towering over her. I'm saying you and Michael need to pack your bags and get out. Today. This is my house, and I won't have you disrespecting me by questioning my decisions. Sarah gaped at him in growing horror. You can't be serious, John. Where will we go? What about Michael's treatments? He needs stability. Not my problem anymore. John crossed his arms. Why don't you take him to your dear old auntie's house in the boonies? It's not like you're fit to raise him in the state he's in. Please, John, don't do this, Sarah begged, tears streaming down her face. He remained unmoved. I'll be generous and give you an hour to pack. But after that, I want you gone or I'm calling the cops. Don't worry, I'll be filing the divorce papers myself. Should be a clean break since the house is in my name. Legs shaking, Sarah stumbled up the stairs in a daze and began throwing clothes and toiletries into a suitcase for her and Michael. She made sure to grab their documents and the emergency cash she kept hidden away, hands trembling as she zipped the bag shut. Mommy, what's happening? Michael stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Swallowing her tears, Sarah knelt and pulled him into a tight hug. We're going on a little trip, love. An adventure to the country. Doesn't that sound fun? She helped him dress and shouldered their bags. With one last heartbroken look around their home, Sarah took Michael's small hand in hers and guided him out to the unfamiliar car in the driveway where Tina sat filing her nails. Thanks for ruining my life, kid, Sarah drawled as they loaded their bags. Enjoy it while it lasts. Someday John will do the same to you. Taking Michael's hand again, she began walking briskly down the peaceful suburban street, trees lining the sidewalks. She had to get as far away from here as possible. I hope Daddy Y will be okay, Michael said, his voice quivering. Isn't he coming with us? Sarah had to bite her cheek to keep from crying. No, baby, I'm afraid it's just you and me now, but we'll be okay. I'll make sure of it. Daddy just needs some time. She glanced back at their house, a tear escaping down her cheek. I hope one day he realizes God sees everything he's doing and shows him the light. But for now, it's you and me against the world, little man. They walked for nearly an hour, Sarah struggling under the weight of their bags, while Michael did his best to keep up, his energy fading. When she could see he was starting to stumble, Sarah stopped and knelt down to his level. I'm so sorry, sweetheart, she said, pushing his sweaty bangs back. I wasn't thinking how hard this would be for you. You've been such a brave boy. How about we get a taxi to take us the rest of the way? Michael nodded, brightening a bit. Sarah managed to flag down a cab, wincing a bit at the high fare the driver quoted for taking them all the way out to her great-aunt's rural village. But the car had air conditioning, and Michael was drooping in the heat, so she agreed. As they settled into the worn leather seats, and the taxi merged onto the highway, Sarah closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. She couldn't believe her life had imploded so completely in less than 24 hours. How had it all gone so wrong? You all right there, miss? The driver asked, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Sarah managed a wan smile. Yes, thank you, just had a bit of unexpected upheaval. We're heading to my great-aunt's old house that I inherited. I've actually never been there before. That so? The driver whistled. You know, that little village of yours has gone through quite the transformation in recent years. Used to be just a sleepy hamlet, but then they discovered natural therapeutic hot springs in the area. Sarah perked up in surprise. Hot springs? I had no idea. Oh yeah, they put in this real fancy private health resort and spa a few years back. Place is always booked solid with rich folks coming to take the healing waters. Prices are sky high too. He chuckled. You're sitting on a gold mine with a house in that town. Property values have shot through the roof. You must have relatives in high places to inherit there." A tiny ember of hope sparked in Sarah's chest. Could it be? Had her dotty old aunt accidentally left her the key to getting Michael the treatments he needed? She hardly dared to consider it. "Mommy, are we going to see cows?" Michael piped up, rousing from his drowsy state. "I want to pet a cow." Laughing, the first real laugh she'd had in ages, Sarah pulled him close and kissed the top of his head. "We just might, little man. And we'll go on hikes and dip our toes in the river and catch glow bugs in jars at dusk. We're going to have such an adventure, you'll see." For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to feel a tiny glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for her and Michael to start over. "Well, I'll be," the taxi driver said as he pulled up the long, winding driveway. "This sure ain't no broken-down shack." Sarah had to agree. As they rounded the final bend, her aunt's house came into view, and Sarah's jaw dropped open. Far from the ramshackle cottage she had expected, the house was a grand Victorian affair, with turrets and widows' walks, sprawling green lawns and colorful gardens surrounding it. It was like something out of a fairy tale. "Wow, Mommy, it's a castle!" Michael crowed in delight. Still in a state of shock, Sarah paid the driver and climbed out, barely feeling the weight of the bags now. She took Michael's hand and together they approached the house. Everything about it was charming, from the intricate gingerbread trim to the welcoming red front door. "Great Aunt Mildred, your house is beautiful," Sarah murmured, though she had never met the woman. They had just climbed the porch steps when the door swung open, and a smiling middle-aged man stepped out. He had a friendly, open face, with laugh lines around his bright blue eyes. "You must be Sarah," he exclaimed, coming forward to shake her hand vigorously. "I'm Jack Carson. I own the resort next door. Your Aunt Millie and I were dear friends. She told me all about you and made sure I kept an eye out for when you arrived." "It's lovely to meet you," Sarah said, finding herself smiling back at his enthusiasm. She glanced around. "This house is not at all what I expected. I had no idea Mildred lived in such a glorious place." "She was full of surprises, old Millie," Jack said fondly. "Sharpest card shark I ever met. Why don't I give you the grand tour, and then we can discuss the spring?" "The spring?" Sarah asked as she and Michael followed him inside, marveling at the spacious, sunlit rooms filled with antiques. "The therapeutic hot spring that made this area famous," Jack explained. "It happens to be located on your aunt's, well, your property now. Millie and I had an arrangement. She let my resort guests have access to soak in the healing waters, and in exchange, I paid her a tidy monthly sum." He named a figure that made Sarah nearly drop the bag she was holding. "That much? Every month?" Jack misinterpreted her shocked silence. "Now, I'm more than willing to continue that arrangement with you as the new owner. I know it's not as much as I could be paying, but your aunt and I felt it was a fair—" No, it's more than fair," Sarah cut in quickly. "I'm just stunned is all. This is beyond generous. Are you sure? I don't want to take advantage." "Trust me, it's a drop in the bucket compared to what we bring in." Jack waved a hand. "Millie adored you, you know. You were her one regret, that she didn't connect with you more before she passed. I think she'd be tickled pink to know you and your boy can have a fresh start here." Tears pricked at Sarah's eyes, and she blinked them back. "Thank you, Jack. Truly. This means everything." 6 months later, Sarah almost didn't recognize her own reflection as she brushed her hair at the antique vanity. Her skin was glowing, her eyes bright, her smile unforced. For the first time in years, she looked happy, content. Life in the village had been the balm her broken little family needed. The bucolic days spent exploring the woods and streams, the cozy evenings curled up together reading books, the delicious country meals that Sarah took such pride in preparing with fresh ingredients. It was like something out of a dream. But the biggest change of all was in Michael. With plenty of sunshine, clean air, and space to roam, his health had improved dramatically. His cheeks were pink now instead of sallow, his limbs sturdy instead of spindly. He still needed his treatments, of course, but Jack had put them in touch with a local specialist who came out to the house. The improvement was remarkable. As for Jack himself, he had become a steady, comforting presence in their lives. Patient and wise, with a silly streak that never failed to make Michael giggle, He seemed to sense when Sarah needed a helping hand or a listening ear. She found herself looking forward to his daily visits, going on long, rambling hikes with him, while Mrs. Norris from the village watched Michael. Gradually, they began to open up to each other. Sarah told him all about John and their disastrous marriage, how lost and broken she had felt. And in turn, Jack shared his own tale of loss, how his beloved wife had succumbed to cancer years before, leaving him shattered. "Moving here, building this place, it gave me purpose again," he said contemplatively, as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of gold and pink. "Millie, bless her, she wouldn't let me wallow. Kept telling me I had too much love left to give to shut myself away." He turned to Sarah, his eyes soft. "I think she was right. We've both been hurt, no denying that. But maybe this is our second chance. To heal. To live again." Hesitantly, he reached out and brushed a stray tendril of hair from her face, his calloused fingers gentle. Sarah shivered at his touch, her heart fluttering wildly. "Jack," she breathed, scarcely daring to believe this was real. That after everything, she could dare to dream of happiness again. A harsh screeching of tires on gravel shattered the moment. Startled, they leapt apart and turned to see a familiar black BMW come barreling up the drive. The engine roared as the sleek black BMW skidded to a stop in a cloud of dust. Sarah's heart plummeted as an all-too-familiar figure unfolded himself from the driver's seat. John. He looked terrible, his face haggard and ashen, his clothes rumpled, but his eyes burned with a manic light as he stalked towards them. "Well, well, isn't this cozy?" he sneered, taking in their intimate positioning on the porch swing. "My wife, shacking up with some hick in the middle of nowhere. I always knew you were a gold digger, Sarah, but I didn't think you'd move on quite this fast." "Ex-wife," Sarah reminded him coldly, rising to her feet. She refused to cower before him any longer. "And what are you doing here, John? I thought I made it clear I never wanted to see you again." "Yeah, well, things change," he said with an ugly smile. "See, I had myself a little revelation. I realized that this place, this house, it's my ticket out, my escape hatch from the mess you and that brat left me with." Sarah's spine stiffened. "What are you talking about? This house is mine, left to me by Aunt Mildred. You have no claim to it." John barked out a harsh laugh. "Oh, but I do, sweetheart. See, we're still legally married, which means half of everything you own is mine, including this quaint little shack and the cash flow that comes with it." He stepped closer, getting in her face. Sarah wrinkled her nose, smelling vodka on his breath. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to put this dump on the market, take the money and fork over my half. That should be more than enough to cover the boys' treatments and set me up with a nice tidy sum to start over with Tina." "Absolutely not," Sarah said firmly, though her heart pounded. "I'm not letting you waltz in here and destroy the life Michael and I have built. We're happy here. This is our home now." John's face darkened, and quick as a snake, he grabbed her arm in a crushing grip, yanking her towards him. Sarah cried out in pain and fear, pushing at his chest. "Listen here, you ungrateful!" John started angrily, but suddenly he was grabbed from behind and wrenched away from Sarah. "I believe the lady told you to leave," Jack said pleasantly, though there was unmistakable steel in his voice. He had a good 4 inches and 50 pounds of solid muscle on John. "I suggest you get in your car and drive away, now." With an inarticulate cry of rage, John lunged at Jack, taking a wild swing. But he was unsteady on his feet, and Jack easily sidestepped, landing a solid punch to John's gut. John doubled over, wheezing. "I won't ask again," Jack said calmly. Face red with humiliation and fury, John straightened up and glared at Sarah, jabbing a finger at her. "This isn't over. You can't keep me away from what's rightfully mine." With that, he turned and stormed back to his car, peeling out so fast the tires left marks on the drive. Sarah watched him go, her heart thundering in her chest. She felt Jack's hand on her shoulder, warm and steadying. "I won't let him hurt you," Jack promised. "Either of you." Sarah turned to him, blinking back tears. "I know." Jack took her hands in his eyes fierce with determination and love. "Let me protect you, both of you. Sarah, I know it's fast, And you've been through hell. But I can't imagine my life without you and Michael in it now. What I'm trying to say is, will you marry me? Sarah's heart soared, the last piece clicking into place. She knew it was impulsive, knew there would be a long road ahead, untangling herself from John once and for all. But looking into Jack's steady, honest face, she felt a certainty, a rightness settle into her very bones. This was her future, her family. Yes, she said, happy tears spilling down her cheeks. Yes, Jack, I'll marry you. With a whoop of joy, Jack gathered her into his arms and spun her around before setting her back on her feet and leaning down to capture her lips in a searing kiss. It was a promise, a declaration, a new beginning. Does this mean we get to stay here with Jack forever? A hopeful voice piped up. Sarah turned to see Michael standing on the porch behind them, his small face alight with cautious excitement. She held out a hand to him, and he crashed into their embrace. That's right, baby, she said, smoothing his rumpled hair. We're officially starting our happily ever after, right here in this special place, with Jack to love us and keep us safe. Michael threw his arms around Jack, who hefted him up with a grin. I've always wanted to be a daddy, he said, voice rough with emotion. I promise, I'll be the best one I can be, for both of you. You already are, Sarah said softly, her heart too full for words. With Michael still held snugly between them, they turned to gaze out over the golden hills, the trees waving gently in the honeyed afternoon light. Sarah knew there would still be struggles ahead. John wouldn't give up easily, but wrapped in the love of her two boys, her little family, she had never felt stronger or more hopeful. 10 years later. Sarah sat on the porch swing, a tall glass of sweet tea in hand, watching with a full heart as Jack chased a giggling Michael around the sprawling green yard. At 18 now, Michael had grown into a strong, handsome young man with a perpetual twinkle in his eye. The picture of health. The years of treatments and country living had worked their magic. As if sensing her thoughts, Jack caught her eye and winked, letting Michael tackle him into the grass where they lay laughing uproariously. Sarah shook her head fondly. Her boys, her world. So much had changed in the decades since she'd fled to this haven with a broken heart and a sick child, not daring to dream of the joy that awaited them. True to his word, Jack had been her rock as they navigated the messy final days of her divorce from John. In the end, the law had been on their side. John's claims on the house held no water, and in fact, his own misdeeds had come to light. Tina, fearing she would be cast aside as Sarah had been, came forward detailing John's shady business dealings, the money he'd embezzled and squandered, trying to maintain his lavish lifestyle. He wound up serving a lengthy prison sentence, his pristine reputation in tatters, all his accounts seized. Last Sarah heard, upon his release, he'd slunk away to the Cayman Islands. She wished him no ill will, only hoped he would someday find the peace and wisdom to become a better man. For her, that chapter was long closed. She and Jack wasted no time starting their new life together as husband and wife. He formally adopted Michael and dove into fatherhood with his signature gusto and devotion. When Sarah discovered she was pregnant a year into their marriage, he wept with joy. Now their daughter Millie, named for her dearly departed aunt, came charging out of the house, her dark curls flying and cheeks pink with exertion. At 8, she was the spitting image of Sarah, a precocious imp who ruled the roost. "Mommy, Daddy, Mikey, come quick!" she hollered. "Nana and Pops are here." Ah, yes, Sarah had nearly forgotten. Jack's parents were coming to stay the weekend, a visit they all eagerly anticipated. Rising to greet her in-laws, Sarah took a moment to savor the perfect tableau before her. Her lively children, her adoring husband dusting grass off his jeans, the tidy but warm grandeur of the house, the glittering of the sun off the burbling creek that ran through their property. To think she had once believed that happiness existed only in fairy tales. Now she knew better. Oh, their life wasn't perfect. There were still skinned knees and spats over homework, busy schedules and misunderstandings to work through. But underneath it all was a bone-deep contentment, an unshakable foundation of love and family. Slipping her arm around Jack's waist, Sarah tilted her head up for a kiss, which he gladly supplied. His eyes crinkled down at her, bright with adoration and the weight of all they'd overcome to get here. "Happy, Mrs. Carson?" he murmured against her lips. "Incandescently," she replied, and sealed their perfect moment with another kiss beneath the blue sky. At peace, at home, at last.